Hey friends, as a new church year begins, especially with the season of Advent, looking ahead to Christ's coming in glory, as well as to remembering the story of Jesus coming in Bethlehem, it's worth us starting on the right foot. And I gotta say, this is something that we as the people of God, we as the followers of Jesus, maybe need to be especially clear about, because for whatever reason, I think a lot of folks have picked up the wrong message about what the Christian good news is about Jesus coming. And first and foremost, it's something to be hopeful about, not something to be afraid of. The season that we call Advent is grounded in all these amazing, beautiful promises from ancient prophets and poets to the words of Jesus as well, announcing about the coming of all things being made new. That's a word to be hopeful about rather than afraid of. And yet, when the prophets talk about a new way of doing things, a new kind of life, where, for example, wolves and lambs can lie down, or when old weapons are beaten into plowshares, that can feel disturbing because it sounds like everything we know that's solid is being shaken. All the things that we're used to, as you know, the way things are being turned upside down. And to be sure, Jesus talks about his coming again as this sudden, unexpected, surprising move that will catch the world, including his own followers, off guard, that we aren't able to predict or pin down, but simply have to live in light of and to be ready for at any time. That can be uncomfortable, but it is good news. And that's why I want us to start this conversation with a closer look at something we talked about this past Sunday in both the congregations, Hope and New Life, but we didn't put up as part of our worship video for this weekend because the sermon from this past weekend was on a different text. But this is one of those passages that a lot of us have heard before, or at least half heard before, and maybe can get ourselves really, really afraid of, when Jesus' point, I don't think, is about making us afraid, but rather living ready for something good to come at any moment. Maybe it's worth us remembering that if the idea of the coming of the Prince of Peace is something that makes us afraid, maybe it's something that tells us we've built our lives on systems that are based on violence and greed and domination rather than true peace and justice. So what we heard this past Sunday, this comes from Matthew chapter 24. And Jesus is talking to his disciples about his coming in glory, what he'll sometimes call as the Son of Man coming. But about that day and that hour no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away, so too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal together, one will be taken and one will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Jesus himself has this way, especially when the gospel writers give us his words, of sort of giving us like a bookend of like, here's what the point of all this is. And Jesus certainly seems to think this is first and foremost about announcing his coming is going to be a surprise. It's not something you can see coming. You won't go to notification for it on your smartphone or an alert coming through on the radio. It's coming. It's this surprising thing. And so Jesus is going to get to saying, so live your life now at any moment as though you are ready for Jesus coming again. And that's less about having a list of religious bona fides. It's more, are we living in light now of what Jesus' agenda or what the new creation will be like? But again, it's really hard for us to get to that. It's really hard for us to hear this and not just be afraid, especially because of the way a lot of religious folks, especially in the wider atmosphere of pop religion in our country and culture, hear a passage like this and think this is supposed to make people afraid of getting left behind. That's often how this passage comes up in conversation, if it does, in our culture's wider conversation. And in fact, lots of people have made an awful lot of money selling books and making movies and all sorts of other paraphernalia, all on the notion this is Jesus teaching that when he comes again, some people will be left behind and you don't want to be them. Okay, here's the thing. if you actually pay attention to what Jesus is saying in this passage, that gets it completely backwards and upside down, right? Jesus uses this image, right, to talk about how surprising it will be when he comes in glory. And he's trying to convey just how unexpected it is. So he reaches for a story that his readers, his listeners, everybody around will understand, right? So he goes, okay, you know the Noah story, right? In the story of the flood, everybody's doing their regular life, right? Minding their own business. They're buying groceries, cooking dinner, making long-term plans like getting engaged and having marriage, that kind of thing. And when the flood comes, man, it throws all their plans out the window, completely upended everything. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody was ready. It was this total surprise, right? Even Noah doesn't know when it's going to happen, right? He's just told, get ready, right? So Jesus is trying to convey this idea of this sudden surprising movement of God into the world that nobody can predict or prepare for, but just really have to live in light of. And then Jesus sort of says, well, in the same way, in his coming, in the coming of the Son of Man in glory, it's going to have this sense of life's going to be going on like normal, and in this surprising way, God's coming will be this surprising great reversal of everything, right? And so he uses the image. It'll be like two are plowing in the field and one is taken and one is left. Two women grinding meal and one is taken and one is left. And that image of being taken, that is a kind of ambiguous image, right? Is it good or bad to be the one who's taken? Is it good or bad to be the one left behind, right? In a lot of American religious culture, and for the last 150 years in American Christianity, there's been this idea, oh, you don't want to be the one left behind, you want to get snatched away with Jesus, except in context, that's not what it really sounds like, right? The word taken, the idea of being taken or chosen or picked, in some contexts could be a positive, in others it could be bad, right? If you're back in elementary school gym class and we're picking teams for kickball, if you get picked, if you get taken, good, that means the team captain picked you. You are good enough to play on the team, right? On the other hand, if you're in the police lineup and the person on the other side of the half-mirrored glass picks you or takes you, it means you've been identified as the burglar, right? You're the guy they remember from the bank robbery. You're going to jail. If you're the turkey that gets picked for Thanksgiving dinner, it's a sign, bad news for you. You've been chosen to be dinner. On the other hand, if you get taken or chosen to be the turkey that gets pardoned, good news for you, right? Being taken or being left isn't always a positive, negative. It's context dependent. So, Jesus, when he uses this image of one will be taken and one will be left, which do you want to be? If you listen to what Jesus says, if you listen to the wider context, talking about the Noah story, it seems pretty clear Jesus has in mind being taken isn't good. Being taken is like being swept away like when the flood comes. You want to be the one left behind, right? In the Noah story, it's Noah and his family in a boat full of animals who are left behind. We have a way of hearing this and getting it all backwards and turning it into a tool to make ourselves or other people afraid. Have you done what you have to do to make sure you're not going to be left behind? That's not what Jesus has in mind. Instead, Jesus seems to have in mind, be ready at any moment. Like, build your life, spend your life on what will last and what will matter. When Jesus comes, all of our piles of money, all of our usual markers of status or success will be wiped away. Not important, not there, right? Swept away, taken from us and erased. The question is, what will last? What will endure? What will be, in a word, left behind? This is a question then not about how can I read the headlines and predict what things will come before Jesus coming again so I know how to invest or prepare for a rapture or something. That's all made up. That's not really what Jesus has in mind. This is rather about, in light of Jesus coming, how do I live my life now? Spending my life, spending my energy, my words, my time, my love on what really will last and what really will endure. And if I hear it that way, this isn't something that's meant to make me afraid or to intimidate me into good behavior, but rather to stop and think with every choice, am I spending my energy on something that's going to last in the new creation? It's something that will really have mattered in Jesus' final coming of the kingdom? Or will I have wasted my life worrying about status or the latest technology or bigger piles of stuff or people I'm afraid of or being intimidated? Maybe I don't have to live ruled by any of those things. It's a question, rather, of being people of hope instead of being people of fear. And that's a good place for us to start this Advent season. What if right now, what if this whole season long, and maybe our whole lives then, we dared to live learning that kind of love, that kind of way of life, learning to be people of hope rather than people of fear. Join us this Advent as we seek to listen to Jesus more closely and to learn how to do that.